Thank you very much, Mark, for those comments. And I love the fact that you've got a vision for 100 chapters. And to all of those here on the line, look forward to, if you just want to get involved, just reach out. We'll be sharing Mark's email after. We're now going to bridge to the dialogue portion of our webinar today. We have a series of questions. You can see here on the screen, why hasn't B2B sales productivity improved in recent years? And that's an area that both Mark and I want to dig into a fair bit. Want to just step back and just talk about some of the dynamics. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the plummeting productivity of B2B sales. There's been lots of media publicity, research reports, and year-over-year decline. And it's becoming quite disconcerting. We live in the age of distraction, where cognitive dissonance is at an all-time high. I think some of you are probably aware that 30% of sales professionals do suffer from attention deficit disorder. And with the sheer deluge of data and information and 7 by 24 always on, it's really impacting performance from a focus point of view. Accenture recently did a major study. It's easily accessible on the web. When we do our follow-up, we can maybe do a link to the research that they've done. But, they're now positioning that productivity has declined to levels well below 30%. And a lot of it's stemming from just the sheer overwhelming aspect of data. So, Mark, we'd just love to hear your perspectives on the dynamics. Obviously, you're talking to lots of people, you're at different forums, different events, and, with your earlier background at Oracle, how different is sales now from selling than it was maybe 10 years ago? And what do you see happening in terms of productivity and what we need to do in this area to improve things?
I think you're so on point just with this era of distraction that we're seeing. But I think the other side of it is that the buyers are also distracted. And that is a key dynamic. And in the history of sales, if you really think about how buyers went about purchasing anything, there wasn't this free flow of information out there on the internet. It was very much you had to go through a salesperson in order to get the information you needed, to do comparison shopping, to demo products, to go through an order process. And what we've seen in recent years is just this intermediation of that, where lower value commodities have gone strictly to directly buying over the web, no interaction. But that's starting to push further and further into what we used to call the complex sale. And so from a salesperson perspective, buyers aren't interested. They don't want to go to salespeople. And so they're avoiding the emails and the calls and the social media stuff. And there's this wall that's being created between buyers and sellers. And so sellers, not only are they kind of distracted and not disciplined in their approach, but it's compounded by the fact that it's even more difficult than any other point in time in the business world to engage with a buyer and to have a truly, genuinely constructive relationship. So that's where we are from a B2B sales productivity perspective. Buyers don't want to engage with salespeople. They feel that there's a level of mistrust. They want to do everything online. And sellers are still looking at sales from this approach of how things used to be. So pushing out lots of quantity of material instead of really thinking about quality, getting into a lot of automation without any personalization, and really focus more on their thing as opposed to truly understanding what are the insights that are going to drive interest and influence and get buyers to think differently. And if you're going to take that type of high road, highly personalized approach, you just need a more disciplined approach in your own selling. And so I think that's part of what we've been able to provide with Enterprise Sales Forum, is a place where we can actually get back to the fundamentals of what makes sales work.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, Mark. One of the things that we're seeing is that, it needs to be an integrated life cycle around the whole customer experience journey. So all touch points really need to be thought through very carefully so each point is meaningful, versus
Exactly.
sales just driving to their own beat without an integrated purpose, or value across the entire enterprise. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride myself, having grown up earlier in Xerox, right? So I would love us to maybe do a future webinar on this, but I know we've got a number of other questions that we want to dig into. So if any of you are listening here on these points, feel free to put out your questions so we can come back to some of these a bit later. So the next question, Mark, that we felt, that would be really helpful for our audience is, given that context, what topics are you finding that you're trying to seed or plant and germinate throughout the ecosystem so that the topics are more relevant, that we are building skills and practices that really help us deal with the current contextual, environment that we're working in?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is starting to deconstruct what the buyer-seller relationship is and getting more into the dynamic of teaching and learning, rethinking the way that we approach from a fundamental level how it is that we engage with our interested buyers, or as Anthony Iannarino says, your dream client. And you got to figure out better ways of engaging. And it's kind of interesting, you pulled up on this particular slide what I thought were three of some of our most interesting conversations that we've had in the Enterprise Sales Forum, because fundamentally, I think a lot of our prospecting tactics have driven more towards automation and not thinking thoughtfully about who we're reaching out to, what messaging matters, and having a higher strategic level conversation with a buyer. And then once you even get that level of engagement, you send an email, or you send a connection request on LinkedIn, or you get someone on the phone. Then the follow-up to that is, what do you actually even say? And I think in this era, particularly with millennials, where everything is so based around mobile and online and texting, and we've gone away from the art of actually having a very deep business-oriented conversation. And we need to get back to those fundamentals. And then thinking even more specifically, when you start to engage with a customer and you're starting to understand a little bit more about what they care about, being able to have a conversation at an executive level and to speak to what someone in the C-suite is going to care about, like we don't have good ways of teaching those types of skills to a new generation of sales professionals. And so those have generally been the topics that we've centered our events around, and those have been great conversations. Particularly the one that we had in New York, selling to the technical C-suite. We brought two CTOs to be involved in the conversation, to listen to what they have to say about their experience on the other side of being a buyer and engaging with sales professionals. And that was so informative to a whole room of about 150 sales professionals to actually hear what they care about. I think was in many ways a huge mindset change for everyone that was listening in that room, that participated in that session. So I think those have been the really great conversations. We're still trying to ask our members, because again, one of our values is we want to be member centric. So asking them, what are the things that they're getting stuck on? Is it negotiations? Is it how to even ask questions? Like, if you think about that, that's really the core of how you build influence, and that's how you get people to engage. But I think a lot of people are just confused as to, well, what type of questions do we ask? How do we structure those questions? How do we create a path in our conversations that can lead to insights, discovery, and a path to a path towards creating a truly genuine opportunity to work and have and make an impact for a prospect. So we're always looking for ideas. We're always looking to deliver what is going to be most impactful. And the second side of that is when we host these events and when we bring on speakers, for us, what's really important is that the people that are going to be sharing their insights, that they're in the thick of it. So a large part of our focus has been getting sales operators, sales reps, sales leaders, and managers to speak of their own on-the-ground experiences, insights, successes, and failures, so that we can all have a conversation about real stuff and make it relevant for everyone in the room, so that they can take these nuggets of practical advice and start to apply it in what they do day in and day out.
I think that's a really good point, Mark, around relevancy, right? And the currency of knowledge, and how in less than 4 months, everything we have learned worldwide is no longer relevant. So, that dialogue and the conversation, that tacit knowledge flow is really, I think, one of the major benefits that the Enterprise Sales Forum has, because it's much faster to have those conversations, share that knowledge, and it's been great to see the growth in the community rallying around you, and delighted to be part of the forum. The next question is obviously, top of mind these days, because women in science and technology, hold less than 25% of the market jobs, and obviously this evening we have a forum on that. But we'd like to just hear your views around the commitments the ESF has to advance, attract, and develop and retain women in sales. I know you're very familiar with the recent Gartner research as well. I think it highlights that only about 18% of sales professionals are women, if my memory serves me right. But just love to get your views on the other side of the of you know of us as humans, the ladies.
It's funny. I was just coming from lunch because I'm here at an event called Rev It Up. It's an event by Lori Richardson and Women Sales Pros to just have a conference for women sales leaders to discuss the things that are important from their perspective, the insights that they're learning. And it was funny because we were talking about the state of enterprise sales with some other folks that have been in sales for a long time at some top tier companies like Marketo and NetSuite. And they shared their experiences on the fact that oftentimes they were the only woman on their team. And I think back to my experience at Siebel, and I think in some ways we've maybe regressed, because not to say that we had parity at Siebel, but we had a lot of pretty solid female sales professionals and female sales leaders in the organization. And as I look today, I don't really see that we've improved at all. In fact, I think we've actually probably not have done as good of a job to help advance women through sales into management and leadership roles. And that really concerns me. And I started to notice this when I think maybe the third or fourth session that we've hosted ever of the Enterprise Sales Forum. Now this is going back 3 years. I had a whole bunch of pictures. I was kind of like a one-man show. So it was kind of funny. I was organizing the events. I was the MC. I was the moderator. I was social media person. I was taking pictures. And that evening, I'm downloading the pictures to clean them up before I post them up on Facebook. And I did a double take, because every picture I was working on, there wasn't a single woman in the frame. And I started looking at the attendance records, and it was way worse than 18%. And that just floored me. I'm like, am I doing something wrong? Are we just doing something wrong in companies? Is this an industry problem? Because that to me doesn't make sense. And so part of my mission over the past couple of years is, can this be an organization through the Enterprise Sales Forum, the work that we do? Can we help make an impact? Can we kind of change that? My fundamental belief from very early on was that we need that diversity. We need different perspectives. Uh, I'm of the belief, and I think this is backed up by various research papers, that women and men do tend to think about things differently or have some different perspectives. And even culturally, right? People have different backgrounds, different life experiences and perspectives. And all of that is very additive to problem solving and to collaborating and to also engaging with a buyer population, which is also changing. And so we should have sales teams that reflect that change in the workforce, in the buyer community. But we're not really there yet. And it strikes me that I can go to an event where there's fellow enterprise sales professionals, and there may be one woman in the entire room. And so we've really doubled down in our efforts to help just highlight women sales professionals and sales leaders in our communities. And one of the ways that we've done that and we've advanced the cause is we've declared October Women in Sales Month. So all of our panels across our 24 chapters, we have events that are highlighting great women sales professionals. We're starting off in Brisbane, Australia, and Toronto today, and then throughout the month we're going to have these talks around the globe. And I think it's just a real eye opener for folks to recognize that, yeah, there are these amazing professionals that have great insights to share, and we should have a platform to do that.
Yeah, and Mark, we're really excited about the forum this evening. And for those of you, that are really quite interested in the content, we can provide you with a link after to the Facebook, because we're streaming the content in the Toronto forum. So we continue the dialogue there. But you're right, the stats, we've basically flatlined over the last 10 years, and the top reasons in terms of attracting, developing women into careers in sales is often that they don't have the networks of understanding, that they can have a successful career. So there's a gap in knowledge. And the other thing, which is always interesting, is if you look at the university ecosystems, you can't get a degree in sales, but you can certainly get a degree in marketing. So you'll certainly see a tremendous number of women in marketing, right? So on that side of the fence, we're doing quite well. As a matter of fact, a lot of the growth is attracting women into marketing, digital, social media kinds of roles. On the sales sides, it's really very much a coaching related and mentoring dynamic. But thanks for all those thoughts. I'm just really, really thoughtful of you to to bring these issues out on a global basis and rally around the gaps. Having a daughter, I'm very much concerned about a flatlining on any industry, given that we know that companies succeed when there's a far more diverse workforce in terms of profitable revenue growth. Now we're going to move the discussion to some other perspectives. Obviously, we've top-lined that attracting women to sales careers is one of the challenges that we've underscored, but there are other challenges or trends for B2B sales, and here is an outline of the top 5 trends that Gartner Group has highlighted. Renewed emphasis on cross-selling and account growth, more disciplined spending on sales enablement, the ever-ending cycle of more investments into CRM or front-end marketing infrastructure, rethinking what does customer centricity mean, much to the discussion that Mark talked about, where the buyers are far more informed than they used to be. How do you engage? How do you create relevancy? How do you advance where there's a meaningful win-win conversation and bring value immediately to the table? The other point is marketing's expanded role across the entire funnel, where not just the lead generation, but becoming far more acute on the leads and the sources and how they can actually help drive funnel closeouts. And at the end of the day, simplification is an ongoing heartbeat at the heart of sales strategy and execution effectiveness. So those were the Gartner B2B Sales 2017 points. Mark, from your vantage point, what do you think we're going to see in B2B sales as top trends, as we have an outlook advancing towards 2018, from your purview to add to this list, or is it going to be much of the same?
Obviously, I talked to a lot of sales leaders. The things that I'm hearing on the ground is, I'd say there's three things, and part of it comes into, I think, the point around simplification. But if you talk to sales leaders, the things that they're really challenged with is understanding the end-to-end flow of the lead to customer process, and all of the steps where we're still very much broken in very key steps in that cycle. And there's this ongoing trend right now called account-based marketing, which I believe, again, if you've been in sales for a long time, you'll recognize kind of a lot of the infrastructure around target account selling. But I think the change now is that we truly do have, or live in an era where technology can map much better to the ideal. And so I think we'll get to a place where we can start to be a lot more specific in how we target, and really connecting that approach from what marketing is doing to where sales will take the ball and run with it. And my final belief is that it's a little bit insane that we can have this huge amount of lead flow. We do this great job in bringing in all the demand, and so it seems like we have a lot of stuff to work with, but in reality, if you look at the end of the pipeline, like, it doesn't amount to much. And I think that's just been the history of not being able to have clear enough tracking from beginning to end, and having a feedback cycle to improve what we're doing. I think the second thing is, we have a lot of tools, but not a lot of them are focused on helping the salesperson make better decisions at the moment in time, that they need to ask the right questions, or prospect the right accounts, or craft the appropriate messaging. And there's a lot of still manual stuff that's involved that we really should be able to move away from. And the technology, I fundamentally believe, is there, and it will continue to improve over time. So, but we're really at this kind of strange inflection point where the technology is on the cusp of delivering massive improvements in productivity. We're just not over that threshold yet. And then the third thing just comes down to, what are sales reps really doing? Like, we know this is the process. Are they following it? Are they missing some fundamentals? Are there deficiencies in how they're engaging in conversations or thinking strategically? And I think a lot of sales leaders are at a point where they look at their sales teams and they want them to perform better, but we're stuck at this situation where quota achievement has not improved, where key sales metrics haven't improved in any consistent way. And I always get back to the point, and you mentioned this before, is that, do we have a real understanding of what a sales education looks like? Do we know what criteria and what type of skills can be applied at a fundamental level that we can successfully create a confident and competent sales professional? And we're not there yet. I would love to see a degree called sales in business schools. And I think we're starting to see a few of these things pop up in the University of Texas, and I think Ryerson's doing some things. So there's a growing awareness that this is a real interesting field and discipline, but I still think we're a decade away from that truly being done at an institutional level at the college. We really need to think, well, what are we going to do in between if I'm a sales leader I need to get my team up to speed. I need them to start thinking about ownership of their sales career and their development. I need to be able to do a better job coaching. And we just need to know what are the fundamentals that are going to actually have real impact in delivering results. And part of what our mission is with Enterprise Sales Forum is to help not only individuals, but also sales teams to start having those conversations, right? And to not think that there's no solutions out there. If we can come together and collaborate and think of this from a team perspective, an organization perspective, like none of this stuff is insurmountable. But we just need to have that mindset that we can make those changes.
Yeah, Mark, just a quick build, really appreciate the perspectives, in terms of the productivity and the efficiencies. And just to summarize, some of your key points around having the right tool stack that really deliver value. I do think there's some stack fatigue going on out there with sales, and more isn't always, enablement driving productivity.
Exactly.
One of the major factors in the decline in productivity is the amount of admin overhead still that B2B sales professionals are being saddled with, and it impacts their focus on talking to real customers, having real dialogue, and in many respects hiding behind email, of which many of the emails are no longer being looked at. So it's I guess really having a critical eye as a leader on exactly how you're going to approach the customer experience, and then getting as much clearance as possible in terms of the minimal insights that you need. We're now going to branch to another major trend in the sales arena. Mark and I are both going to co-speak about this. Obviously, SalesChoice, we specialize in AI and augmenting intelligence, and very much focusing on solving some of these distraction issues. Our whole platform is a cognitive sciences platform. And we've seen major productivity improvements by simply prioritizing the right opportunities through a number of AI and science, very fact-based methods. Some of the aspects of the market, it's obviously a very, very high growth market. Right now, the predictive and prescriptive AI analytics market is growing about 55% compound annual growth. Overall outlook for 2022 is around 19, 20 billion. When we started to enter this market, it was running at about 30%. So it's an interesting space to be in. Not everybody's ready for AI because if the underpinnings of the data quality aren't there, then you really can't leverage that. But there are many organizations that have kind of gone through maybe 2 or 3 generations of CRM, being on the SAP stack, then maybe migrating to Microsoft, and then migrating to Salesforce, trying to clean up unified workflows, etc. Just talking about the Salesforce ecosystem, because it's certainly one of the major ones, but by no means the only one. Their revenue that's attributed to customers is well close to 300 billion by 2021. And I think those of you who follow the market, that they've entered the AI and analytics space as well. So, Mark, are you starting to, hear more conversations, with your networks throughout the communities in terms of interest in how AI can actually, improve sales productivity? Really like to kind of talk, you and I, about the good, the bad, and also the ugly. We have learned a tremendous amount over the last 3 years on all of those 3 dimensions. So, just love your comments here.
I think the good thing is that I don't think I've actually seen ugly. So we're still very early in this game, where there's a lot of different types of technologies that are being developed for sales organizations. And I will tell you, this is a very real thing. I talk to a lot of VCs and investors, and they see AI having a huge, huge impact in the sales arena. So if you see a lot of funding activity, it's really being driven by the fact that you have a lot of investor interest. You have a lot of very savvy, very smart entrepreneurs who are now seeped in a decade or more of a lot of major advancements in AI. And they're looking at the sales arena as it stands today, and it is a huge opportunity. potentially even bigger than CRM. And the reason is this: AI has the, if done well, if we're talking about the good, has the potential to significantly impact, more so than any other technology to date, the impact of what a sales rep does. And I think there's sometimes a risk that, I think from the bad perspective, people think AI will replace sales professionals. And you may see things like Forrester and other industry analysts saying that it's the death of sales. I think it's the complete opposite. I think they're missing the bigger picture, where we're actually creating a new era of what I call the augmented sales professional, which is using the intelligence of crowds, the intelligence of massive data sets, and using algorithms to hone in on many aspects of the sales process today, which is a huge mystery. So I think there's a huge transformation potential in AI. And I'm actually curious because I'm not really the expert in this, to be perfectly honest. I see a lot of technologies, but I'd like to hear your perspective. I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, have you seen AI start to deliver that impact? I've seen it maybe on a small scale, but if you have anything that you can share, like a story, I think I'd be interested in hearing that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We've certainly experienced, that you have to have a really good foundation to be ready for AI, and it all resides within the being clear and succinct about what problem or use case are you trying to solve, and also the quality of the data that's there to be able to go and solve the problem. So that level of clarity, I think, is really important, and obviously the sales resources need to really be in sync with that point. And yes, I'll be glad to share a case study with you. I'm going to share a case study from a company called Relation Edge. They're one of the fastest growing companies, one of our clients in the US. And this picture is of Matt Stoiko, the CEO. They basically are an SI, for Salesforce. With the high growth, they're about 500 employees, coast to coast. Right, their head office is in San Diego, but presence in pretty well all the major U.S. cities, and also a recent one in New York. Mark, what happens when you've got these high growth realities and or even slow growth is accuracy of forecasts can be problematic in terms of investor confidence, the banks, where you're needing the cash flow and being able to manage the growth of the business. And he was spending literally a couple weeks every month constantly drilling down on every opportunity, trying to validate was this real or not? Could they count on actually that commit in the forecast? And just the usual drilling that sales professionals do to give an accurate forecast to the CFO and the CFO to the board, etc. And if you look at all of that time and waste, and often in Excel spreadsheets, it's significant. So he basically is a pretty detailed guy. Matt said, interesting, but I'm going to basically look at what SalesChoice predicts over a 3-month period before I buy. And I'm going to analyze what my team says. We're going to see who's more right than wrong. We came in at an overall 90% on every scenario. So if he wanted to say what's going to happen in 6 months, obviously, he'd look at, 50% of that, what's going to happen next month. And that's where his confidence is. He doesn't have to spend all that time. He can do simulations and scenarios because there's enough history in the account, and they're fairly disciplined as well, putting their data in on a timely basis. So they're not sandbagging. What I mean by that, by sandbagging, is putting in the opportunity right at the point of contract closure. So if a company has the right disciplines and practices, AI can absolutely drive a competitive advantage. We've seen some clients that we've got, and the cases on our website, where they were able to also reduce their headcount in sales to reinvest that into customer success roles, and actually drive their revenue up by 2 to 3 million over 12 months. And it was all about focusing on the best deals with the best health signals. So with large data sets, if you've got 2 to 3,000 historical wins and losses, these advanced AI methods are very powerful. Now, the ugly on, not in this case, but in terms of other potential, approaches here, what people often do is they take a subset of the fields and attributes and then drive all their AI assumptions. My doctorate was an outlier theory, and I've always known that, around the edges, there's often on the long tail effect more insights, and that's what we found is that we can get to levels of 95 to 98% predictive accuracies on the long tails, and then that time can be, quite frankly, reinvested into more optimal coverage. So the worry I have in the space, Mark, it'd be good to get your comments, is that there's a different level of skills in the sales organization that may not have the depth in data sciences to be able to make the right decisions here on selecting the right vendors, on the methods and tools. And even the IT organizations are often not skilled in AI and data sciences. So we do have definitely a competency gap. In the industry within the sales operational group, these areas require not only a knowledge of statistics, advanced statistics, and AI and data science methods, because they're all kind of integrated, and you don't always find in deep mathematical gurus in sales shops as well. So I think the ugly is a lot of folks jumping on the bandwagon without enough knowledge to make an informed decision, and maybe being disappointed with the outcomes because they really didn't understand the problem, they really didn't understand the methods, and they bought into a black box rather than an open, transparent AI orientation. Thoughts on those points, Mark?
My thought is that I'm like I'm a data scientist wizard, and I'm in sales. No, I'm kidding. I think from a it's easy to use the tools to confirm things you want to believe, and that's probably the most dangerous bias of them all, because you're not learning, you're digging in. And the promise of AI is that it can help us to understand at a very deep level what reality looks like. But on the flip side, if you start to pick and choose your data, it's no different than researchers that cherry pick the data. They throw out the bad results and then publish a paper. Well, that's not science. That's mythology. And we're at a stage now where I earnestly believe that most forecasting that happens in companies is mythology. And their best estimate is, let me stick my finger in the wind and see where the wind is blowing. There's no accuracy. And a large part of that comes at the very beginning of the stage where there's not the data to work with. And so I think you're absolutely right, Cindy, that there needs to be a discipline around the data. There needs to be a discipline understanding you can't cherry pick your results. And there also needs to be a discipline in being able to discern, is what we're seeing accurate? Because to your point, I think in many of these cases, what we call algorithms or machine learning or AI isn't any of that. When you look behind the scenes, it's pretty surface level. And I think the challenge that we're seeing, and maybe this is the ugly aspect, not from the technology itself, but the way people are presenting it, is that they're slapping the AI label on anything just to get investor interest, just to get people to buy and listen to what they have to say. When in reality, there's no actual rigor, there's no true data science behind what they're offering. So I think, if sales leaders ask me my opinion on what to look for, I think it's really critical to have an understanding of what is that technology really doing, and focus in on results.
Yeah, Mark, you're
And be
absolutely
open to
right. The methods are really key. We've certainly seen with the competitive landscape some companies just doing frequency count analysis and obviously not deep Bayesian statistics, which are far more advanced, or using advanced methods of decision trees, but maybe simulation overlays to also counter maybe some of the dynamics. So again, it's also buyer beware. I do agree with you. AI is in vogue. Often people do slap the label, and there's a big difference between rigor and lightness. Want to move us along to the next section, Mark, and really we're going to step back for all of you here and open it up in a couple minutes to your questions, and thanks for sending them in. But I wanted Mark just to step back and summarize some of the lessons that him and his team have observed and experienced in building out the enterprise sales forum, to kind of summarize successes, lessons learned. Everybody's in any company is really working hard to build a community, and whether you're a small, mid, large company. And Mark, you've certainly nailed it, and I think the goal of setting out for 100 is very, very compelling and exciting. So if you'd like to summarize lessons learned, and then we'll move to the questions with the audience.
Well, yeah, I think from what I've taken away from this experience, that people do care. There's a real thirst out there for understanding, how can I be excellent at sales? How can I hone my craft? And so the demand is out there. We just can't operate fast enough as an organization to really meet that demand, and to get these groups out there fast enough. So I think 2018 will be a really interesting challenge for us as we scale our organization to meet the thirst of sales professionals and leaders for real practical advice. And I think for just overall, when I look at the sales profession, we are under a huge transformation. There is this massive assault on the ways that we've been operating as sales professionals and the way that we've been leading sales teams, and realizing that a lot of what we hold as truisms and beliefs aren't those at all. We're building upon myths. The myth of we need lots of volume to succeed, or the myth of marketing does that over there and we do this. The myth that you can just do it all as a sales professional, or that you have to be a certain archetype to be successful in sales. Like those beliefs are falling by the wayside. And what I always feel is the true value, what we deliver in terms of the enterprise sales forum, is that we have a place where we can really talk about this stuff and have a real conversation, real debate, and real knowledge being created and shared to a community of folks who are yearning for this information, and yearning to be the best sales professional that they can be, and that they can feel they can own their sales development. And that's what it really comes down to. And so I hope that, knock on wood, that we can continue to deliver on that vision for the next 10 years and beyond.